The absurd, a condition of existence that we all live with, yet rarely confront directly. It's more than a philosophical concept, it's a reality we experience every day, though we may not always recognise it, and for the most part probably don't. What is it though, really? At its heart, the absurd is the conflict, the unresolvable, relentless conflict between two opposing forces. On one side, the human desire, our deep-rooted need to find meaning, order and coherence in life. On the other side, the cold, indifferent and irrational universe that offers none. We ask the biggest, most profound questions. Why are we here? What's the purpose of all this? And we are met with a resounding, deafening silence. It's an existential void. That's the absurd. Camus recognised this tension. He understands that as human beings we are wired to seek answers, to crave purpose. We build religions, ideologies and philosophies, all in an effort to give meaning to this chaotic, unpredictable world. But the universe doesn't care about our desires or our attempts to make sense of it. It simply exists, indifferent to our suffering, our joy and our questions. We want the world to explain itself, to justify our lives, to tell us that all this struggle, all this pain leads somewhere. But the reality is, it doesn't. The world remains silent. And in that silence, in that disconnect between our expectations and reality, we find the absurd. Now, how do we deal with that? How do we, as thinking, feeling human beings, respond to the realization that life has no inherent meaning? That all our hopes, dreams and aspirations are, in the grand scheme of things, nothing more than dust. For many, this realization is just flat out terrifying. It's easy to fall into despair. Some might even argue that if life has no meaning, if there is no ultimate purpose, then why continue? Why not end it? Why not choose suicide as an escape from the futility of existence? And yet, Camus stands firmly against this option. For him, suicide is the ultimate surrender. It's a way of avoiding the reality of the absurd rather than confronting it. To end your life is to admit defeat in the face of meaninglessness, to give in to the despair that the absurd can provoke. But Camus believes that there's another path. He rejects this notion that because life is meaningless, it's not worth living. In fact, it's the very absence of meaning that gives us a unique kind of freedom. But there is another escape many of us turn to, perhaps more subtle and certainly more seductive than suicide: the leap of faith. This isn't physical suicide, but rather philosophical or spiritual suicide. We create systems of belief, religions, ideologies, or grand narratives that promise meaning, order and justice. We convince ourselves that there is a higher purpose, that there's a divine plan, that our suffering has some cosmic significance. We leap into the comforting arms of faith, hoping it will shield us from the harshness of the absurd. We tell ourselves that there is a God who watches over us, a heaven awaiting us, or a historical destiny that justifies all our sacrifices. But Camus rejects this too. For him, the leap of faith is dishonest. Essentially, it's a refusal to face reality as it is. When we place our hopes in something transcendent, whether it's God, an afterlife, or even some sort of utopian political future, we are denying the absurd. We are refusing to acknowledge that life, in its rawest form, is without inherent purpose. We are clinging to illusions, to something beyond reason, because the truth is too painful to bear. But Camus insists we must not leap. We must not deny the absurd or escape it. Instead, he offers a third option. Perhaps this is the most difficult and the most courageous of all. Acceptance. Acceptance of the absurd. This isn't a passive resignation. It's not about giving up on life or becoming indifferent to it. Quite the opposite. It's about embracing the absurd fully, looking into its face and saying, yes, life is meaningless, but I will live it anyway. This, for Camus, is the act of true rebellion. We live without appeal. That's how Camus puts it. We live without expecting life to give us answers, without demanding the universe provide us with a reason for our existence. We accept that the world is indifferent, that death is inevitable, and that there is no ultimate justice waiting for us at the end. And in that acceptance, paradoxically, we can find a kind of liberation. This is where Camus' notion of revolt comes in. Revolt is not about rejecting life, but about refusing to be overwhelmed or defeated by the absurd. It's an active and defiant stance. It's about living with the full awareness that life has no inherent meaning, but choosing to live it fully and passionately anyway. Imagine Sisyphus, the figure from Greek mythology, eternally condemned to push a boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down again, over and over again, for all of eternity. His task is pointless, it's repetitive, futile and absurd, and yet Camus imagines Sisyphus as happy. Why? Because Sisyphus has accepted the futility of his situation. He doesn't hope for the boulder to stay at the top. He doesn't dream of escape. Instead, he embraces the struggle itself, the constant effort and the endless push. That is his rebellion. Sisyphus embodies the human condition. We too are engaged in tasks that may seem pointless in the grand scheme of things. We work, we love, we strive for goals that, in the end, may lead nowhere. And yet, like Sisyphus, we can find meaning in the struggle itself. It's not the destination that matters, but the act of pushing the boulder. The effort, the living, this is the essence of Camus' philosophy. Live in revolt, acknowledge the absurd, and, in spite of it, live with passion, integrity, and courage. In doing so, we achieve a kind of freedom. Once we accept that life has no preordained meaning, we are free to create our own values, our own sense of purpose. We are no longer bound by the false promises of religion or ideology. We don't need to wait for some ultimate revelation. We are free to live for the present, to fully engage in the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. This freedom is exhilarating, but it's also daunting. It places the responsibility of meaning squarely on our shoulders. We cannot look to the heavens for guidance or hope for some final redemption. We must craft our own lives, our own meaning, here and now. And what of ethics? If life has no inherent meaning, does that mean anything goes? Does that mean we're free to act however we please, with no regard for others? No, not at all. Camus doesn't advocate for nihilism or moral indifference. In fact, the recognition of the absurd can lead to a profound sense of solidarity with others. We are all in this together, all of us confronting the same indifferent universe, the same inevitability of death, the same existential condition. And that shared experience can give rise to compassion, to a form of morality based not on divine law, but on our common humanity. In his later works, like the Rebel, Camus explores how the act of rebellion can lead to ethical action. Rebellion for him isn't just an individual stance, it can be a collective one. It's a refusal to accept injustice, cruelty, or oppression. Even in a world without inherent meaning, we can create meaning through our actions, through our solidarity with others, through our commitment to human dignity and justice. We fight not because we believe in some ultimate moral order, but because we recognise the intrinsic value of life itself. And what role does art play in all of this? For Camus, art is another form of rebellion. Just as we impose order on our own lives in the face of chaos, So too does art impose order, however briefly, on the chaos of existence. Art is a way of expressing the tension between our desire for meaning and the world's refusal to provide it. In creating art, we are confronting the absurd. We acknowledge it, yet we also transcend it, if only for a moment. Art doesn't give us answers, but it allows us to explore the complexities of existence, to grapple with the absurd, to communicate our struggles, and to find beauty even in the face of meaninglessness. So where does this all leave us? The absurd is not a call to despair. It's a call to live more fully, more authentically, and more passionately, to live with the knowledge that life is fleeting and fragile, and that there is no grand narrative to save us or explain our existence. But that's not a reason to give up. It's a reason to live even more intensely, to embrace each moment, to find joy not in some distant hope, but in the here and now, in the act of living itself. We are, in the end, the absurd heroes of our own lives, aware of the futility, aware of the indifference of the universe, and yet still committed to the struggle. We keep pushing the boulder, not because we believe it will stay at the top, but because in the struggle itself, we find meaning. We find life. We find freedom. And for that, Camus is the ultimate and that for Camus is the ultimate act of rebellion. Not against the universe, but against the temptation to give up, to stop striving, to stop living. And in that rebellion, in that defiance of the absurd, we create something truly meaningful. Our own lives.